Hello, this is JWS Yoi with the first fanfiction that will go up on my channel. This fanfiction is called We Dragons Care About Those We Love. It is by Let My Dragons Roar. It is on fanfiction.net, and this will be a chapter by chapter thing. I will read one chapter in this video. There are around, 19 chapters. So, yeah. This is chapter 1, Breakup. Let's get on with the fanfiction. The day before winter set in, before the snow and ice rolled into Burke, the trees lost their orange and brown leaves. Hiccup woke up earlier, before Toothless or his father had woken up, and walked through the almost empty village to his girlfriend's house. The only sound was the click from his metal foot hitting the ground, and he walked along the empty street. When Hiccup arrived at her house, he was glad to see Astrid opening the door, a smile on her face, instead of her father. Astrid, though, happy to see her boyfriend, asked why he was up so early and invited him in. Hiccup declined her offer and asked if she would go for a walk with him. The 17-year-old nodded and stepped outside, taking Hiccup by the hand and smiled. Hiccup returned her smile, and with sad and guilty eyes, before leading her through the village streets in silence. Mid-walk, Astrid noticed how tense Hiccup was and squeezed his hand. "What's wrong, Hiccup?" Hiccup swallowed and glanced around the empty street before pulling her between two houses inside, looking into her sadly, holding both her hands with his. "Astrid, I'm really sorry to do this, and... Wait!" Astrid spoke, cutting off Hiccup completely. Her smile dropped. "It's okay." What? The 18-year-old was baffled by Astrid's words and blinked in confusion. "It's okay," she replied, a small smile on her lips. "It's okay. I know what you've been going through, and I know how much pressure you've been under because the academy and becoming chief, when your dad steps down, and the dragon problems we still need to fix. I understand how tough your life is right now, so it's okay if you want to break up with me." Hiccup sucked in his breath, blinking at her as he thought her words over in his head, his mouth open but no words coming out before finally stuttering out. "How did you know?" Astrid's smile grew slightly and she squeezed his hands once more. "Well, we haven't exactly had a proper conversation for a few weeks, not to mention all the times I've invited you flying and you turned them down, which you never used to do," Astrid continued. "And you haven't gone flying in a week with Toothless, too. You always run around the village doing things for your father or Dauber. Plus you haven't hung out with me or the others for so long. It was kinda obvious that something was wrong." Hiccup breathed out, looking down his hands in hers, and slowly a weak smile appeared on his face and looked back at Astrid. Thank you, Astrid. It's also obvious you haven't slept in a while. Like, what? A week?" chuckled Astrid. How? Was all Hiccup could say. Was she always watching me this closely? The everlasting rings below your eyes and the fact I saw you sleeping in the forge when you missed dinner yesterday were a bit of a giveaway, she explained with a smile. Hiccup started at her in disbelief, a smile. "Sorry?" Hiccup stared at her in disbelief, before a smile crept across her face. Astrid smiled in return, staring into his eyes, for a moment before suddenly letting his hands go and punched his arm, making Hiccup yelp and rub his arm, frowning at Astrid. "That's for breaking up with me." Hiccup glared lightly at Astrid, about to speak, but he yelped as Astrid punched his arm again, Astrid smiled and pointed her finger at him. And that's for making me break up with myself. Astrid, Hiccup started, but was cut off once again when the girl threw her arm around his neck and hugged him tightly. Hiccup froze before slowly wrapping his arms around her waist, sighing in relief. What's this for? Everything else, Astrid whispered, squeezing his chest and her arms before pulling away from him, smiling. Hiccup smiled back. Thank you, Astrid. You're amazing. I know. Astrid grinned before looking over her shoulder and turning back to Hiccup, brushing strands of gold behind her ear. I should go. Okay, Hiccup smiled. Thanks again. Astrid nodded and tapped her shoulder lightly with her fist before turning and jogging away. Heading back to her house, Hiccup watched her go and sighed, running his fingers through his hair before walking into the street, and glanced around a few Vikings in the street before walking back to his house slowly. Toothless' ears twitched as the sound of the front door closing and opened his eyes, noticing for the first time that morning the empty bed across the room, and frowned, a yawn escaping through Toothless' gums before the dragon stretched, grunting as he moved his stiff front legs out in front of him, claws out at their fullest. Hiccup walked into his room, bidding his dragon a quick "Morning, bud," before falling into his bed with a sigh. With his head hanging off one side of his leg, Hiccup sighed heavily and ran his fingers through his hair, stopping when the palms of his hands rested on his closed eyes. Toothless stood up and shook his head, trotting over to Hiccup and grunted, jabbing his knee with his nose. Sorry, bud, I'm too tired. Hiccup moaned and pulled himself into his bed properly and rolled onto his side. Go ask Dad for some breakfast. Toothless sighed, ears falling back onto his neck, as he stared at Hiccup before he turned and walked towards the door, pulling it open with his claws, and slowly walked down the stairs, turning his large head to see Stoic sitting at the table, sipping at the mug and something, and picked at a half-eaten fish. Sorry, yawned. On with the story. Toothless moved towards the man, with a sad expression, and grunted at Stoic, making him look up from his food, at the dragon, merely rolling his eyes, and stood up. Hiccup, too tired to feed ya again? Toothless nodded and followed the man as he fetched a large basket from the corner of the room, sitting near the fireplace, spilling the contents on the floor and walking back to finish his own meal, leaving Toothless and his own food. The dragon sniffed the pile before digging in hungrily. Hiccup had once again forgotten to give him dinner, which meant Toothless had to find his own food, which was, for a flightless dragon, hard. Toothless did not blame Hiccup for forgetting to feed him. If anything, it just made the dragon sadder than ever to know how stressed his human was. I'm off for the day, Toothless, Stoic spoke up, causing the dragon to lift his head. I might be back a bit late. Toothless watched as his Stoic pulled his helmet and walked towards the door. Make sure Hiccup doesn't sleep in. I have a meeting and want him to be there, early. The dragon slowly ate his meal, glancing around the empty room, even so ever so often as he wondered whether or not he should just let Hiccup sleep in. But that was, of course, to get both, mostly Hiccup, in trouble. Something that the boy did not need, and decided it was best not to. With his belly full and his fish gone, Toothless stood up and stretched, wondering if he could try to get Hiccup to go flying with him. When he heard someone run down the stairs, Toothless turned and watched as Hiccup ran down the stairs, pulling his fur vest on and past the dragon, and opened the door, glancing back to see Toothless staring at him hopefully. Sorry, bud, I can't be late. I'll be back later tonight. Hiccup frowned, guilt clear on his face, as the dragon whined, ears and wings drooping in disappointment before rushing outside. The door closed behind him with a bang. Huffing, Toothless climbed to his feet and bounced towards the door, opening and stick his head out, only to see Hiccup's back as he ran off towards the village. Toothless sighed before glancing around, seeing no one near the house, or looking at him, before stepping outside, turning, and ran along the outskirts of the town, a gleeful smile on his face. Time to put the plan into action. Okay, this was the first chapter. Sorry about any of the mess-ups in the reading. I'm a little new to this as well. It's literally the first thing going up on my channel. But just remember, this was a fanfiction. We dragons care about those we love. It is by Let My Dragons Roar. Please go and, well, favorite his story. It's not me you should be liking the video, it should be his story you should be faving. I'm just reading it if you want to listen to it. So, that's all. Bye!